Well, we got the wings in here, and I got the flap and the aileron painted through poly spray. We had about 4 days of nice weather, but the weather is changing back to rain, and so we got all that stuff taken care of while the weather was good. I got the hangar door closed again. It's still nice out there now, but it's starting to get a little blustery. Well, I got the hangar door closed so it doesn't blow a bunch of crap in here and disturb those wings while they're hanging there. I gotta say, it's kind of nice walking around underneath that wing with it out there without any struts on it, kind of like a Cessna 210 or a 177. It's going to be kind of a pain when I get the struts on there with it down low like this, getting around it, but sacrifices will be made. I got up there and marked that fuel line for that reserve tank before it needs to be cut off, and I need to get these flap cables set up. So I went ahead and pulled those through the wings so I can mark those to see where to cut them off and to set those up. So I can do that when I pull these wings back out of the way to fix this hinge on this right side and to fix that fuel line on the left side. So I hung a set of vice grips on those cables to add some weight to it, so pull them with a little bit of tension on them. Those cables go up through that wing root, the fuselage wing root, and then come back in a Y back along the top of that fuselage there, and there's a tab back in here just forward of this bulkhead right here that they connect into, and then there's a single cable that goes back down around to the flap handle. Well, I want to try to balance that out so that tab connector stays right in the center line of the fuselage there, so I have equal cable travel on both sides. So I hooked up a vice grip to each side, and then I manipulated the two vice grips, and I stuck my endoscope in here in the rear baggage compartment and up into the top of that baggage compartment where it's covered there. You can't see it from inside the fuselage with it completed. And I looked in there and I adjusted both cables so there's a little bit of tension on them, and they're both balanced right in the center. And now I can mark where they go through the wing rib there, and I know that I had 2 3/4 inch from there to the end of the eye that is formed in that cable, in the flap cables. Working on getting this left wing fitted up. I pulled it out and I cut off that fuel line back there, the long one, and put the beading tool on there and put a bead in the cut off section of that tubing. Although after looking at it, I could have unscrewed it from the fitting on the fuel tank and got it out of there and done it out on the bench. Anyway, I got it done up there. I got that flap cable made up on that side. This wing is ready to go on. I did do a little bit of trimming on some of the fabric on this forward hinge point here. This one seemed like it went in good, but I might still do a little bit of sanding on that or something, but I'll put some peralcatone on there when it goes together. So now I can pull that in there closer and trim those fuel lines up and get those hooked up, but I have to go to town and get some more hose clamps for those 1/4 inch fuel lines. So I think that wing is ready to go on. That's one of the nice things about using those straps. The straps were holding it up. One person can kind of move it around and jockey it around a little bit, but I was able to pull that away from the fuselage so I could get in there between the wing and the fuselage a little bit by taking those straps and pushing them towards the fuselage on the wing, and just pick the wing up a little bit, slide the strap over, then when you release it, that wing will go out a little ways. So I was able to get about 1.5 feet or 2 feet of clearance there between the wing and the fuselage to work on it. And then I used this strap on this side to jack that wing up a little bit to get it up in the air so I could get under it a little better. Now I can let that back down to the level of the airplane where it goes on and start sliding it back in where it goes. We've got the fuel lines all hooked up here on the left wing. So now it's time to use these bullets that I made. These are the AN5 bolts that I made on the lathe earlier to make for bullets, and they'll go in. I've got a line-up pin in here now in this hinge and through the spar, and this will go in there. I'll grease that up and use a hammer to press that in there to line that hole up, and then we'll run the bolt in behind it, and that bolt will follow that through, and the hole will all be lined up. So I have one for the front, and there's the rear hinge back there. Now there's a standard on that rear hinge. You measure the distance between the hinge and the spar, the gap between them. the space, and if it's over a certain amount, then you put a washer in there to make up the difference so that there's no slop in that rear hinge. So this is how that bullet or drift pin works. I'd originally lined this up to held this on there with this line-up pin. I've got a small one in one end, and anyway, that's what I used initially to hold positions. And then I've got this set up close, maneuvered around to where I could get this started, and I got this bullet or drift pin started. And see, that's coming out the other end now. Now I've already screwed up on that because I didn't put the seaplane hoist on there, the seaplane ring on there, so I've got to take that back out and do it with the seaplane ring on there. The pin is all the way through there now, so that spar is lined up and attached to that hinge. I've got my seaplane eye there, so now I can put my bolt up there and drive that through, and everything's all lined up. The bolt will just follow that pin through there, and it won't booger up the threads or anything or screw anything up. And do the same thing on the back one, except for the back one there I don't need the lifting eye on it. It's just a pin goes through it. Well, I got the pin in the rear hinge, and I didn't notice it before, but I didn't pay that much attention. Of course, we were trying to get the front one in, and it was swinging back and forth. But there is a pretty good gap there on that rear hinge. I took 2 washers and put in there to fill that gap. So that's done. That pin's in there, and we can just push that bolt through there. And that one takes an AN 5-16 alpha bolt, and the front one we've established takes a AN 5-17, but with that lifting eye on there it takes a 21 or 22. 21 will work on it. I was playing with it earlier. 21 will work on it. 22 would need 2 washers on it instead of 1. We got the first bolt in the rear hinge. We're making progress now. It went through there just like it was designed to. The bullet slid right through it and came out. And just gentle taps on that bolt. It didn't booger up the threads or anything. So that hinge is on there. I still got to tighten up the bolt, of course, the nut, but all right, there's the left wing mechanically attached to the fuselage. A long time of waiting there. I got this bolt in the front spar, in this front hinge. I got that in there, and I got it tightened down. I didn't tighten it all the way down because this is a hinge. It's got to raise and lower. Both of them have got to be able to hinge around that point to adjust for the dihedral and the wing washout and all of that technical crap. And put the wing spars on. And the torque for those bolts is only 6 pounds, 6 foot-pounds, so it's not very much to begin with, but that's on there. So I got the fuel line hooked up, and fuel lines hooked up, and the bolts in there. Now I've got to hook up the rest of the peripherals here. This is for the airspeed, the pitot line and the static line, and those come out over here, and I've got to figure out which one of those is which. And then I've got to hook up the nav light and the landing light and the taxi light. These cables here, antenna cables, this one goes for the GPS antenna, and then the one in the back goes for the marine radio antenna. And then this side will be all buttoned up. So I got to figure out which lines those, which line is the pitot line and which line is the static line, but that's not too big of a deal. I'll just take a little bit of compressed air and blow through that, and those lines need to be cleaned out anyway. So anyhow, where we go. Left wing is attached. I can take that strap off, that inside strap off, and leave that outside strap on. So I've got to do the right wing now. I've got to loosen it up, and it's pretty simple. It just has the 2 main fuel lines and the 2 fuel lines for the fuel gauge. That's it on that. For hookup, there's a hookup for the nav light and an antenna for the aircraft comm. That one's pretty simple, except that that hinge there is too tight, so I've got to pull that one out to clean that hinge out so I can get that thing to slide in there. Anyway, that's a big thing. Got one of them on.